Hi, everybody. So today I am here to do the end of the year book tag that Destiny and Larry have both done. I will link their videos in the description. This tag is very similar to the mid-year freakout tag, but instead of mid-year, it's like end of the year wrap up sort of. So this is sort of like an extension of the holiday book tier list, although I'm going to be more talking about general books I've read this year and mentioning like one Christmas book or the authors of some of the Christmas books that I've written. Alright, so the first question I wanted to talk about before I get into the favorites part of it is reading goal. My reading goal for Goodreads was 250 books, and I surpassed it by 200 books by June 30th. And at this point, I've read over 1,000 books, and I read 10 books a week. My goal for next year is more genre-focused, and is to read more memoirs and essay collections, and to reread favorite fairy tales to see what inspiration I can get for my own. Favorite authors, debut or new to you. So I wanted to preface this whole end of year book tag by saying I am new to BookTube. I have always been a reader my whole entire life, and for an experiment this year, I went through and read books that I read while I was in school, from middle school through college, to analyze if my opinions still remain the same, and I mentioned those books in my tri-monthly reading wrap-up from August, September, and October that I will also link in the description. So I have read a ton of books this year, and these are my favorite authors. Sarah Adams, who is coming to Portland for a book signing when her new book releases next month, and I'm super excited to go to meet her. Kristen Hanna, Bridget Kemmerer, who wrote A Curse So Dark and Lonely, which I read as part of my fairy tale retellings TBR, and it's one of my favorite retellings of Beauty and the Beast because there is good representation for my disability of cerebral palsy, because the main character, who is supposed to be representative of Belle, she works in the White House as a lawyer or something, and she has cerebral palsy. So I really liked how Bridget Kemmerer discussed how this character lives with the disability, and she gets transported from the real world to the fairy tale world, and that's how she gets into the Beauty and the Beast plot line. So the rest of my favorite authors of the year are Debbie Macomber, who is a romance author that Lexi's mom recommended to me back in the spring, and so far I have read 2 books by her: Must Love Flowers, which I gave 4 stars to, and her Christmas release, A Christmas Duet, which is a Christmas book about a songwriter who escapes from her hometown for the Christmas holiday to try to get more inspiration for her music. And the side plot is that her sister finds out that she's dyslexic, and I just read the scene where Daisy confides in Haley about her disability, and I just love that whole scene between them. And if Debbie Macomber ever writes a follow-up book to A Christmas Duet, I would actually like to see how Haley helps Daisy navigate her disability. The next author that I wanted to talk about is Mari McFarlane. This author writes contemporary romance books, and Haley Pham and Rachel Catherine have recommended her to me. I just finished reading Just Like Us, which is a it's like I don't know what the exact trope is, but it's about a couple who breaks up and then gets back together and how they navigate their romance after they get back together. So I really enjoyed this book, and the next book that I am reading by Mari McFarlane is called Between Us, which Rachel Catherine just reviewed in her November wrap-up. So, I will link Rachel's video in the description as well, so that way you can see what she thought of the book. The next author that I wanted to talk about is Kerri Maniscalco. She wrote the Kingdom of the Wicked series, which is a fantasy series that's set in hell. And I really love how she describes the atmosphere of hell and like the relationships between all of the princes and their love interest. And one couple I forgot to put in my favorite couples category is Emilia and Wrath from Kingdom of the Wicked. Kerri Maniscalco came out with a new book at the end of October called Throne of Secrets, which I still need to read, and that will be reviewed in a later video. I will be doing a video at the end of January that is anticipated releases wrap up, and that will be for October, November, December, in January, and that video is the video that I will be talking about Throne of Secrets in. That video will be out on January 25th. The next author I wanted to talk about is Marissa Meyer. She wrote the Renegades trilogy, which is a superheroes trilogy. She wrote the Lunar Chronicles series, which is a series of fairy tale retelling books, and she recently wrote a middle grade novel called Let It Glow, which I recently read, and I gave Renegade series 4.5 stars. I gave Lunar Chronicles 4.75 stars, and I gave Let It Glow 5 stars. Let It Glow is about two sisters who find out that they were adopted, and one family is Catholic and the other family is Jewish. And these two girls who are in middle grade novels, I feel like that is like upper elementary to middle school age. So I would be assuming that these girls are like maybe between 4th and 6th grade, and their names are Holly and Aviva, and Aviva has a little brother named Aaron, who's probably a couple of years younger than her. Like, I believe that Holly and Aviva are 10, so like Aaron would be between 6 and 8, I'm guessing. So I really liked the dynamic relationship between Holly and Aviva, and also how they help Aaron work through the fact that he has a new sister, because he never knew that he never knew that Holly and Aviva were twins. The next author that I wanted to talk about is Tizonia Odette. She wrote the Entangled with Fae series, which is another modern retelling series of Disney fairy tales, kind of like Lunar Chronicles. Lunar Chronicles is set in like a dystopian future where kind of like the world has ended, and it's set in like a not so distant future at the time these books were published. So these books were published in 2012. And so in the first book, Cinder, which I finished 2 weeks ago, Cinderella is a cyborg. And then I just recently finished the second book, Scarlet, which is a Little Red Riding Hood retelling where, as it turns out, Little Red Riding Hood and her grandmother are not eaten by the wolf, but her grandmother disappears in another way, and it's a murder mystery it's a mystery about how they solve her disappearance. The third book in the series is a retelling of Rapunzel, where instead of being locked in a tower, she's in outer space on a space station. And Cinderella and Little Red Riding Hood have to go rescue her. And then I think Snow White, I think that book pretty much stays pretty similar to the whole theme of Snow White. Now, with Chisonia Ardette's books, they're more rooted in fairy tale and fae. That's why it's called Entangled with Fae. So my favorite books in the series Entangled with Fae are Kiss of the Selkie, which is a Little Mermaid retelling, and The Curse of the Raven Prince, which is a Cinderella retelling. I also like the Snow White retelling, A Taste of Poison, because Snow White is my least favorite Disney movie because I really think she's kind of a boring princess, and I just like the unique modern spin that Chisonia Audette put in on her in this series. She came out with a new series in August called Corset Strings and Fae Wings, which is a combination of fairy tales in Regency England. So think like Disney movies meets Bridgerton. And her first book in that series came out in August, and I loved it. Book 2 is coming out on Tuesday, and I'm so excited for it. So that will be another book that I will be adding to my hold list at the library. The next author I wanted to talk about is Catherine Walsh. This author is from Ireland, and she was recommended to me by Carrie Rees. She wrote 2 Christmas romances called Holiday Romance, which I'm still waiting to get at the library, and Snowed In, which I talk about in my holiday tier ranking video, which came out on Thursday. Oh, no, it came out earlier today. Today's Thursday. So, in the last author I wanted to mention is Courtney Walsh. Does anyone know if Courtney Walsh and Catherine Walsh are related? I'm just curious. I don't know if they just have the same last name by coincidence or if they're related to each other. But anyway, Courtney Walsh is a contemporary romance author, and she was recommended to me by Jess and Emmeline over at These Lyrics and Lines. I'm currently reading The Summer of Yes, and back in June, I read the Happy Life of Isadora Bentley, and I just love her writing and the characters that she develops. The next book by this author that I'm going to read is called Countdown to Christmas, which is a Christmas romance novel that's like a road trip romance. So that should be hopefully coming into the library soon, and I can't wait to read it. The next category I wanted to talk about is books that make you cry. Most of these books made me cry out of sadness, but most of these books made me cry out of sadness. I thought there was one that made me cry out of anger, but maybe there wasn't. Oh, what I meant to say was most of these books have like sad endings to them, and that's why they made me cry. But one of them actually has a happier ending, and it's about a person's personal growth. So I will go all of these books one at a time. The first two books in this category are by Friedrich Bachmann. The first one is A Man Called Ove, which is about this grumpy old man whose wife has been dead for several years, and he's just really miserable and wants to die, but he befriends his next door neighbors, and I love the relationship he develops with the next door neighbors, and that movie that relationship was adapted perfectly to the screen in the movie version that came out in 2022 that I saw with Matt and Patty and Sonia before Matt and I moved to Maine. And it was one of Tom Hanks's most phenomenal acting performances in all of the movies that I've seen him in over the years. He's been one of my favorite actors for a very long time. Ever since he did Woody's voice in Toy Story in the 90s. The next book by Friedrich Bachmann I wanted to talk about is called And Every Morning the Road Home Gets Longer and Longer, but also by Friedrich Bachmann. This book was mentioned in a video where Katie Coulson picks Sarah without an H's TBR, and it's about the relationship between an 11-year-old boy and his grandfather who has Alzheimer's disease. And the reason why this book made me cry is because I had a personal connection to it, because as I have mentioned previously, I had both of my grandmothers, lost them to Alzheimer's in 2014 and 2021 respectively. So it made me think of all I went through with them losing their memories. The next book you guys are probably sick of hearing me talk about this memoir because I talk about it so much. I don't blame you if you are. If you want to skip over to the next book, that's perfectly fine with me because I talk about this book so much. The next book I'm talking about is Matthew Perry's memoir, Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing. The reason why this book makes me cry is I grew up watching Friends as a middle grader and a teenager. Like, I started watching Friends when I was 11, and I watched it till I was 18, because the finale aired, 4 weeks before I graduated from high school. So, I basically grew up with these characters, and, I connect to these characters more as an adult than I did when I was a teenager. And I always connected to Chandler and liked him a lot for his sense of humor. And when I read Matthew Perry's memoir, I could definitely see by the way he was describing how closely his life was connected to Chandler's. And I can definitely see how art imitates life while re-watching the series, especially with all of the issues he goes through with relationships and his issues with his parents being divorced. Because there's this one scene in one episode, I can't remember the episode, I think it's the episode where Ross kisses Chandler's mother when he's drunk, the one with Mrs. Bing. So at the end of this episode, Chandler gets in an argument with his mom about how he felt abandoned by her because she's always traveling around the country promoting her books because she's a romance author. And Rachel is a big fan of her books. Basically he confronts her about how he is angry at her for abandoning him. And then, when I read Matthew Perry's book and saw how he had issues with his mom because of, feeling abandoned by her because she was the Prime Minister of Canada and always busy with work and stuff. But, I mean, he does share some insights about them, bonding at the dinner table after she got home from work and stuff. But he seemed to have a tighter relationship with his dad based on the observations of what I read. His dad, John Bennett Perry, was in Friends in one episode called The One with Rachel's Dress from season 4. He plays Joshua's dad, and he is my favorite one-off character in Friends because he was so funny in that episode. So the thing that made me cry the most about this book was when I was younger and I was watching Friends, I was mostly in the show. I was mostly into the show for, like, the relationship dynamics between the characters, and Monica and Chandler were always my favorite couple. But Friends Lovers and a Big Terrible Thing really gives a big insight into what goes on behind the scenes. Like, there's one part that made me cry the hardest was the part where he talks about Jennifer Aniston confronting him on the set of Friends about his drinking, and, like, that made me cry because, first of all, I bet the conversation that wasn't discussed was, like, how concerned they all were with his drinking and everything. But that just made me know how close-knit their cast was and how much they all cared about each other. And I honestly have a really hard time watching Friends, and there are certain episodes that I cannot watch because of how sad it makes me feel. Like the episode I just talked about how he confronts his mom about being abandoned, and then the other episode I just watched recently was the one when him and Monica have, like, the chicken dinner in the bathtub, and like, they're eating dinner, drinking wine in the bathtub, and he says, Monica ducks under the water when Joey comes in the bathroom, because at this point, I think they were still hiding their relationship from everybody else. This was probably, like, a few episodes before the one where everybody finds out, which is one of my favorite Friends episodes. And while Monica is ducked under the water, Joey is surprised to see Chandler in the bathtub, and Chandler says, "I've had a very long, hard day." And then there's another episode in season 8 when Rachel and Ross announced to everybody that Emma is going to be a girl, because they didn't know the sex of the baby yet. So in this episode, Chandler is, like, taking a bubble bath by himself, and he's really enjoying it. And the reason why I had trouble watching these episodes is because of the nature of Matthew Perry's death, because he died in his hot tub of an overdose. The next book I read this year that makes me cry is called Firefly Lane by Kristen Hanna. I have read this book twice this year. I have been moved to tears both times because, I'm sorry for the spoiler if you have not read this, but this is a scene about two girls who meet when they're teenagers and how their relationship develops over time as they grow up. And closer to the end of the book, Katie, who is one of the female leads, is diagnosed with cancer. And I don't want to spoil the ending completely, but it makes me cry. So it makes me cry just talking about it. So the next book I wanted to talk about that makes me cry is Little Women by Louisa May Alcott, which I'm planning on rereading soon, because I've been watching a Book Olive's old videos, and she made this video, I think it was last year or the year before, where she pairs up nonfiction and fiction books. And the book she paired up with Little Women is called Meg, Jo, Beth, and Amy, Little Women and How Much It Means to People. And the scene that makes me... First of all, I can't wait to read the Meg, Beth, and Amy, How Little Women Impacts Other People book. That's on hold at the library right now. And as I have mentioned, the scene in Little Women that makes me cry is when Beth passes away, and how emotional it makes Jo, because she is taking care of Beth up until she dies. The next book is a more recent read, which I go into more detail about in my nonfiction November wrap-up video from November 20th, which will also be linked in the description. So this memoir is by Michael K. Williams, who was an actor who was on the TV shows Boardwalk Empire and The Wire. And if you have seen either of these shows, I'm wanting to know what you think of them and if you think I should watch them. So leave a comment. So I go into detail about my rating for this book. The reason why I chose to pick it up for Nonfiction November was because obviously it deals with the topic of addiction like Matthew Perry. Michael K. Williams was also a drug addict, and unfortunately, he did not live to see his book published. He died like 2 months before the book came out. The book came out in June 2021, so he died in March or April, and I'm just really sad that he didn't get to promote this book and take it on tour like Matthew Perry did for Friends, Lovers, and the Big Terrible Thing, because I'm sure he would have been as inspirational to other people with his story from addiction as Matthew Perry was. The next book is called The Happy Life of Isadora Bentley by Courtney Walsh. So this book made me cry tears of happiness and not tears of sadness because the relationship that Isadora builds up with her coworker Cal is very sweet, and also she builds a relationship with her neighbor's 10-year-old daughter Delilah, which is also very sweet. And I will try to see if I can find a video where I review The Happy Life of Isadora Bentley, and I will link that in the description below. The final book in this category is The Wishing Game by Meg Schaefer. This book made me cry because the relationship between the main female character, Lucy, who is a 24-year-old paraprofessional in a kindergarten classroom, I believe, and her relationship with her student, Christopher. They bond because of the fact that they are both sort of neglected children by their parents. Christopher's parents died from a drug overdose, and the reason why Lucy has issues with her parents is kind of similar to In My Sister's Keeper by Jodi Picoult. Like, the sister is always in the hospital because she has a really bad illness, and the dad and mom are too focused on the sister's illness to really pay attention. So Lucy, at age 8 or 9, was shipped off to go live with her grandparents, and she got lost in this book series called the Clock Island books, which to me is similar to the Magic Treehouse series that my sister used to read by Mary Pope Osborne. And so the author of the Clock Island books announces that he's going to be coming out with a new book soon. So he has a challenge for his readers, and this includes Lucy. So 2 things that were off-putting about this book was when the police come to when the social services people are interviewing Christopher about where he wants to live, and he says, "Oh, I want to go live with Miss Lucy, my teacher from school. And the social workers don't even question this and ask if Lucy is, like, qualified to take care of a little boy. They don't even think of considering asking the next relative in his family, like his uncle or his grandparents, if they want to take care of Christopher. Sarah, without an H, also was off-put by that. And then, like, so what happens in the backstory of Lucy is that she actually met the author of the Clock Island books and the illustrator when she was younger, because she wrote a letter to the author saying she really loved the books, and then she met him and the illustrator in person, and, like, the illustrator, like, 20 years later, or however long, whatever the distance was in between when she was a kid and how old she is now, she's 28, basically, the illustrator guy, his name is Hugo, he comes off as really creepy because, he was like, oh, I remember when you were just a kid, and I was like, really, I was turned off by that too. So the part that made me emotional about this book was the bond that Lucy forms with Christopher. The next category I wanted to talk about is biggest disappointments. So let me preface this topic by saying that most of the books in this category are the same as they were in my mid-year freakout tag. There are only 2 books that I read that I'm adding to this list that are new. And the first one is called Incidents Around the House by Josh Malerman. This is a horror book that came out on October 16th. And it was hyped up by all of the horror booktubers that I follow. But Destiny Sidwell reviewed this book too, and I agree with what she said, that the pacing was off. The book is narrated by an 8-year-old girl, but her tone shifts from her sounding like she's a lot older to then sounding like she's a lot younger. And I just didn't like how she called her dad Daddo. I just thought that was weird. And I just couldn't get into this book because, as I just said, the pacing was too slow. And it was just really boring. The next book I wanted to talk about is Iron Flame by Rebecca Yarros. This is a sequel to Fourth Wing. Basically, Xaden turns out to be a really big jerk to Violet. Their relationship goes back and forth, and they almost seem like Ross and Rachel from Friends with how poorly they get along and how poorly Xaden treats Violet. Like, they were a much nicer couple in Fourth Wing. So the third book in the Fourth Wing series is coming out next month, and I do not think I will be reading it, unfortunately. If you are looking for another Rebecca Yarros book to read, you should read her book Variations, which just came out. It's a romance historical fiction. Well, it's not really historical fiction. It's a contemporary romance book that just came out November 18th. I started it a couple of days ago. I'm already on chapter 20. And it kind of reminds me of The Notebook. Although I like Hudson a lot better than I like Noah in The Notebook because he is a lot less abusive. And so far I am like, so chapter 20 is like 30% in on, that's my progress on, Variations. The next book is the sequel to, Divine Rivals. Divine Rivals was a 5-star read because I love the romantic build-up between the two main characters. like A Court of Mist and Fury, which was another disappointment, the sequel, the second book in the ACOTAR series, Ruthless Vows mostly focuses on the war that's being fought, and this is more like a fight of mythological gods, though. Like, I don't know what the war in ACOTAR is about, because I DNF'd A Court of Mist and Fury at, 45%. Because there was too much sex and also the war. So, Ruthless Vows was the same way. As far as the war part goes, I don't think there was a lot of sex, really, which was good. But yeah, Divine Rivals was a lot better. I gave Ruthless Vows 2.5 to 3 stars, and I gave Divine Rivals 5 stars. And with A Court of Mist and Fury, I gave that 3.5 stars, and I gave A Court of Thorns and Roses 4.75 stars. The next book in this category is called The Lost Story by the same author who wrote The Wishing Game. The reason why I was disappointed in this book was it was advertised as a book that was going to kind of be like a modern retelling of the Chronicles of Narnia, specifically The Lion, the Witch, and the Wardrobe, which was my favorite book in that series. That's a series I'm going to be reading once I finish rereading Harry Potter, actually. Yeah, I just couldn't get into The Lost Story. I couldn't really see how it related to Chronicles of Narnia, and I couldn't really get into the relationship of the two main characters either. Meg Schaefer's writing is really good, as it was in The Wishing Game, but I just couldn't get into the relationship between the two main characters. So the best sorry. So best characters and best couples are basically the same exact category. So I'm just going to read off the characters in this category. Jax and Evangeline from Once Upon a Broken Heart series. Daphne and Miles from Funny Story, who are so Jess and Nick coded from New Girl that it's not even funny at all. And I love Emily Henry so much for that. Skylar and Weston from Wild Eyes. This is from Elsie Silver's new series. I forget the name of it. So this couple in this book is a down-on-her-luck country singer and a music producer who's a single dad. And I'm going to talk about his kids in a minute when I get into the best child characters category, which I added to this. What's it called again? End of year book tag. The next couple that I wanted to talk about is Justin and Emma from Just for the Summer by Abby Jimenez. I love how Abby Jimenez builds up the relationships between her romantic leads. Her writing is just so great in this way. And what I like the best about Justin is that, so he is tasked with he is the friend of Bree's brother from Yours Truly, the character who needs the transplant for the kidneys. And so I'm guessing he's in his late teens, early 20s. And his mom abandons their family because she's stupid, I guess. I don't know the reason why for the abandonment, but he is basically left to take care of his younger siblings who are between the ages of 5 and 8, which is really admirable for such a young guy. And I would actually like to see a sequel to this book to see if Justin and Emma get married and to see like what the dynamic would be between Emma and Justin's siblings and if Justin and Emma have any kids. The next book couple I wanted to talk about is Dr. Matthew Vine and Athena from At First Bite by Olivia Dade. My friend Kate introduced me to this author back in March, I want to say. And the thing I like the most about Matthew is how he takes care of Athena when she has her breakdown and admits to him that she is depressed. I really, really liked how much he cares about her. I think he's very sweet. So basically what happens in this book is that she is supposed to marry his brother, but then the brother calls off the wedding, and I can't remember what leads to her depression. I think the marriage being called off is part of it, but I don't really remember because I read this book so long ago and I have to reread it again. The next couple that I want to talk about is Iris and Stevie from Iris Kelly Doesn't Date by Ashley Herring Blake. This is the third book in the Bright Falls series, which is a series of contemporary romance novels set in a fictitious town in Oregon called Bright Falls, which is very, very, very similar to Stars Hollow from Gilmore Girls. I definitely picked up on those kind of vibes. So this book is based around a local stage production of Much Ado About Nothing by William Shakespeare, and Stevie, one of the romantic leads in this book, is in the play, and like Iris is a girl who is in love with her but is afraid to like admit her feelings, and I just love the buildup of their relationship. I love Ashley Herring Blake's writing. And I have read this whole series of Bright Falls, and of course, because of the references to theater, Iris Kelly Doesn't Date gets 4.5 stars. Delilah Green Doesn't Care got 2.75 to 3 stars. And Astrid Parker Doesn't Fail, book 2, got 4 to 4.5 stars. Speaking of the Bright Falls series, we're moving into the next category, which is a category of my creation called Favorite Child Characters. And I want to talk about 2 child characters in the same moment because I find that their personalities are very similar and that they both have their own like sarcastic wit about them that reminds me of Chandler Bing. These characters are Ruby from the Bright Falls series, who is the daughter of Delilah Green's love interest. And Delilah Green Doesn't Care. I can't remember her name. And then Waylay from the Knock 'Em Out series by Lucy Score, who is the niece of Naomi. I just love these characters, and I think that they were so expertly written by Ashley Herring Blake and Lucy Score. The next child characters I wanted to mention were Junie and Gus from Rainbow Rowell's recent release that came out in August, Slow Dance. I loved the scenes with them in them because I thought they were adorable. And I mean, I liked the buildup of the relationship between Carrie and Shiloh. Junie and Gus are Shiloh's kids, who are 5 and 3, and they're adorable. But, like, these characters are supposed to be in their 30s, like in their early to mid 30s. I'm in my late 30s. I'm actually going to be 40 in August, believe it or not. But, these characters are supposed to be in their 30s, but to me, they felt like they were written to be, like, late teens to early 20s. And maybe that's because I have read all of Rainbow Rowell's... Well, I've read a couple of Rainbow Rowell's YA novels, and this is her first adult novel. And maybe I don't know. I like her writing, and I found Slow Dance to be much more engaged than Fangirl or Eleanor and Park. One thing I did not like about Eleanor and Park was the racial insensitivity towards Asian people, because that made me think of the movie Pretty in Pink from the 1980s, where they were so insulting towards the Asian character in that movie. And you would think society would have matured by then, but, like, in Eleanor and Park, I didn't feel like that. It made me uncomfortable. So, Slow Dance gets 3.75 to 4 stars. Eleanor and Park got 2 stars. Fangirl got 2.75 to 3. The Fangirl manga series, also by Rainbow Rowell, which is like a graphic novel version of Fangirl. I'm on volume 3. I love it. Like, I don't know. For some reason with Fangirl, I had trouble getting used to the characters as it was written in the narrative of the book. I don't know why. But for some reason, with the manga, it was much easier for me to, like the characters more and have their relationship become more believable or something. I also really liked one thing that I think makes the Fangirl book too long is the fact that the fanfiction chapters are interdispersed in between the actual narrative of the book. Like, if I had written a book about a fanfiction writer, I probably would have maybe put fanfiction chapters after every second chapter instead of after every chapter, because it just made the book too long and too drawn out. But with the graphic novel, it was really cool to see the fan fiction, because you not only did you get to see the writing of it, but you also got to see the illustrations, and it was cool to see how the illustrations mixed with the writing. The next kid character I wanted to talk about is Emmy and Ollie from Wild Eyes by Elsie Silver. These are Weston's kids who are 10 and 7, I want to say, and they're adorable. I love their banter back and forth between them and Skylar, and I really hope that Skylar and Weston get married, because I want to see them build a relationship with Emmy and Ollie, because they're just so cute. And the final child character I wanted to talk about is Danny Torrance from The Shining by Stephen King. I read this book, and this is a book that I should have also added into Books That Made You Cry, because the thing that made me cry about this book is that I was so frustrated with Shelley, because I wanted her to leave the Overlook Hotel and take Danny with her, because her husband Jack was so abusive. And, like, I watched the movie in October of The Shining, and I felt the same way as I did when I read the book about, in the movie, what actually happens is that they do actually try to escape, but it doesn't work out. So I like the editing of the book much better than the movie, because at least at the end of the book, they actually make an attempt to get away, and it works. And in the movie, it doesn't. Sorry to spoil the movie and the book, but Danny is so cute, and I hated the fact that his dad treated him so bad. It just made me really upset. The next category is another category I added. I cheated by adding categories to this book tag, but that's because I couldn't come up with answers for some of the questions that Destiny and Larry provided to me. So, the two books that I wanted to talk about in this series for best essay collections are Disability Visibility by Alice Wong and How to Ruin Everything by George Watsky. So, Disability Visibility is a essay collection that was compiled by Alice Wong, and it's people with disabilities talking about their disabilities, their diagnoses, and how they have overcome various challenges in their lives. As somebody with a disability, it was great to read this essay collection. I read a essay in this collection that was by somebody with cerebral palsy, and I really enjoyed that and connected to it. As a person with cerebral palsy, I was able to relate to her. And then there was another essay I read about a girl and her service dog, which was really powerful. Like, I can't connect to that story as much as the cerebral palsy one because I do have a vision impairment, but I don't have a service dog. I just love these essays. And the second essay collection that I liked is called How to Ruin Everything. So I found out about this book through a list I found online about books that that describes Friends characters. And I bet you can guess which character this book describes. I'll give you a few minutes. And if you guess Chandler, you're absolutely right. So, as I said, I connected to Chandler. As I have said in other videos that I posted, I connected Chandler. I connected Chandler's character much more as an adult than I did when I was a teenager because he has anxiety, and I do too. And these essays are basically like about putting yourself in certain situations, like social situations where you could potentially ruin them because of anxiety and how you can like cope with it, which I really enjoyed. The next category I added to this list is called Favorite Manga Series, and I already talked about Fangirl when I talked about comparing all the books that I've read by Rainbow Rowell. So the other manga series I want to talk about is Heartstopper by Alice Oseman. This was recommended to me by Sarah Caroli and Rachel Catherine. And I am on book 4, and I have just so enjoyed the development of Nick and Charlie's relationship. They are just so cute, and their relationship is so wholesome, and I love it. A book that surprised me, A Curse by True Love, which is the third book in the Once Upon a Broken Heart series by Stephanie Garber. I talked about this in one of my previous videos, which I'm sure I'll be able to find it. And I'll link it in the description once I do. I basically talked about how the second book ended on a cliffhanger, and the result of the cliffhanger was really disappointing because I went into that book for some reason wanting Apollo to end up with Jax, but I can't remember why I wanted them to end up together, so I guess I was a little bit disappointed. But then as I just said, Jackson and Evangeline were my favorite couple that I read about this year, and I just love the buildup of the relationship and the love triangle between them and Apollo. The other book that surprised me was Animal Farm by George Orwell. I read this book as part of my experiment of rereading books that I read in school to see if my opinions would change, and I would say they have, because I read this book in 8th grade when I was 14, and I hated it because I thought it was boring and the material went way over my head. But the reason why my opinion changed is because of what we went through with this election year, with Trump being reelected, and I was just able to make so many parallels between the animal community and Animal Farm, and how Trump was acting like a dictator throughout his first pregnancy in 2020. So, yeah, there's that. And finally, we have Final Short Story Collection, which was another category I added. And I added this so I could talk about 2 short story collections I read recently. One is by Naomi Novik, who wrote the Scholomance trilogy, and Spinning Silver, and Uprooted. And basically, this short story collection is a bunch of short stories that are set in the same universes of all of these books, and one that is not set in the category, in the universes of her other books, is actually one that I found was really creative. It was a story called Dragons and Decorum, which is set in Regency, England, and Elizabeth Bennet from Pride and Prejudice is a dragon fighter, and Mr. Darcy is her competitive dragon fighter, and I just loved it. And then the other essay collection I wanted to talk about is called Short story, not essay, is January's by Oliver E. Blake. This is by the same author who wrote Atlas 6 and One for My Enemy. And, I mean, they were all romance short stories that were set in fairy tale worlds, which I really enjoyed. And I gave Buried Deep in Other Stories 4.75 stars, and January's 4.5 stars. And as far as Oliver E. Blake's other books, I gave One for My Enemy 5 stars, the Atlas 6 3.75 stars, and her YA novel that she publishes under Alexis Foulmouth, or I can't pronounce the last name, but she wrote a YA modern retelling of Twelfth Night by William Shakespeare that was Reese's YA pick for June, which I gave 5 stars to. And then for Naomi Novik, Spinning Silver got 4 stars, Scholomance trilogy got 4.75, and Uprooted got 4.75. Then I was reading her other series about dragon fighting. I don't remember what it's called. It's a long name that begins with a T. But I think I started reading that series, out of order, so I need to start reading it from the beginning. So, thank you for tuning in to my end of the year book tag video. Stay tuned on Friday. Not Friday. Tomorrow's Friday. Stay tuned on Tuesday night at 9:00 p.m. for my review of Make the Season Bright, Ashley Harrington Blake's Christmas release. And have a great weekend, everybody. Thanks for tuning in. Bye.